All right, folks, welcome, welcome. If y'all want to hop to your seats and get a good view so we can hear. Can everyone hear us right away? Can I get a whoop whoop?
Whoop whoop. Okay. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, yeah, if you want to feel welcome, we have some bathrooms in the back just for a little housekeeping. And then we should also have some marshmallows later and a telescope sighting downstairs. But can we hear me? Do we need higher volume? Higher volume. Can you hear me now? Is this better?
Hi,
Welcome. So I work here at Neighborhood Engagement at Urban Ecology Center. Our whole idea is to look to the neighborhood and see, like, what are we interested in? What are we hoping to learn here? This Potluck committee started years ago with a committee of folks who were excited to dive a little deeper into food systems and how it affects us and how it affects our community. And the Potluck seemed like a perfect way to pull folks together. So I also want to credit, thank you for being here tonight and sharing some food and dishes, and this has been wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. If you're ever interested in being a potluck host, it always is better when we have more folks looking forward to getting involved even one step more. Feel welcome to come on out and reach out. Some upcoming things for Urban Ecology Center before we welcome our awesome panel here. We have coming up soon here, we have a cool, we have a clothing swap that is Awkward Family Photo themed on November 9th, and that'll be a Saturday. So you bring your clothes, you swap them with community members to produce textiles or first use textiles, and then you hop out into the park to get an awkward family photo with your friends, your neighbors. It's kind of a goofy event. We also have Noche de Alteres microphones. And that is going to be on the 25th at our Menominee Valley location. Hop over. And then our autumn celebration, if you have families or neighbors looking for a cool way to get into like some pumpkin and fall themed things, our Washington Park branch is going to have a big neighborhood celebration. There'll be a little food. There's going to be
All right, I want to welcome everyone here. Thank you for being more tonight. Why are we having this tonight? And why are we doing it? One is Hemp is now part of our agricultural system. So it is part of now the life of Wisconsin and our agricultural products. The second thing is that I think we're in a very unique situation when it comes to cannabis because we have not had any legislation yet on it. And we're in a space here where we can get legislation that will take best practices and put a system in place that will work as we get into this. There's no doubt we have to work from whatever system we put in place, but getting it framed in the right way from the beginning will help us in a lot of ways to get to the right place on this issue. And as voters, really, we need to be educated and be able to discuss this in a way that's helpful for all the communities in Wisconsin. So we want to thank you very much to our experts here. We have 3 panelists who are here and then some other people who are here who also have expertise. Let me start with our experts today. We have Representative Darin Madison. Representative Madison. Yes, give a hand. We have an elected official here. He represents the Assembly District 10 at Shorewood, Glendale, and north and east sides of Milwaukee. He's running unopposed this year, so this is the campaign trail. This is him knowing where he's going to be, and he is also a co-author of the potential cannabis legislation. So it has a lot of information about how this works from a legislative perspective. He was born and raised in Milwaukee. He graduated from Ronald Reagan IB High School before attending Howard University. He's been organizing in Milwaukee since he was a teenager and has previously worked for the African American Roundtable, Urban Underground, City of Milwaukee's Environmental Collaboration Office, and the Urban Ecology Center. Yes. In the Capitol, Representative Madison has dedicated his time to developing policies that prioritize the needs of opportunity youth and other marginalized communities. He serves on the Assembly Committee on Children and Families, Criminal Justice and Public Safety, Workforce Development, and Corrections. He is also a member of the Bipartisan Legislative Children's Caucus, and he was appointed to and serves on the Milwaukee Child Welfare Partnership. So let's welcome back Representative Madison to the meeting. We also have on our panel tonight Phillip Scott. So Phillip Scott is a dynamic leader in the hemp and cannabis movement and serves as the president and founder of, and this is going to be long but important, Wisconsin Hemp Farmers and Manufacturers Association, or as we like to throw around, WIHFMA. He has roots in Fairbanks, Alaska, where he was raised as part of the Inupiaq community, for which he's very proud and cherishes that background. In 2004, he moved to Madison, where he forged a path in hemp and cannabis advocacy. And by 2014, his work and vision blossomed into the WIHFMA. In 2017, where he passionately bridges the gap between farmers and the industrial sector. His mission to promote safe, sustainable hemp and cannabis practices not only enriches local economies, but also enhances quality of life, making hemp and cannabis accessible and beneficial for everyone. So welcome, Phillip. Thank you for being here. And then finally, Brooke Shawver. Brooke Shawver is the general manager and event coordinator at Canine Infusion Bar and Cafe, where she brings her passion for holistic wellness to the forefront of their operation. Yep. As a studied herbalist and trained medic, she has a deep commitment to healing people and communities through plant-based medicine, as well as her outspoken activism work in Milwaukee. Brooke completed her nursing degree in 2022. Congratulations. and is currently pursuing a degree in public health and integrative medicine at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Both a cannabis advocate and patient, she combines her healthcare expertise and advocacy for natural solutions to inspire a healthier, more sustainable future. So let's welcome Brooke to the UEC. And we also have, and I'll just point out, so Colin, what is your last name? Plant. He is the founder of Cannabis here. We got him to be here. We have Marcus, who is a hemp farmer. Raise your hand. And anyone else here in the cannabis expert category? Okay, the USDA. So we have a full spectrum of possibilities here as far as understanding more about cannabis. Here's how tonight's going to work. What I've asked each of the panelists is to come with an overview and give us an overview of your perspective and expertise on cannabis. Let them open up with some things. I then have some questions that I'll ask, and I've asked them to jump in wherever they feel like they have an expertise, and we'll have that discussion. And then we'll leave some time at the end for questions. We'd like to wait for the end so that we can kind of get a foundation of what we're talking about and get some insights, and maybe you've already answered your question by the time we get to the end. But we'd like to start with Representative Madison.
Absolutely. Starting with me, so overarchingly, I wanted to talk about the bill that I introduced. Cannabis legalization has been worked on in the state of Wisconsin for a long time. The person who has been championing this issue in the state legislature for a vast majority of that time has been Senator Agard. When she was a state representative, she worked on closely with Senator Larson on this bill, and then when she became a state senator, she worked with my predecessor, David Bowen, on this legislation. Since I have been elected since 2022, I've been working closely with her office to refine this bill, specifically the pieces related to equity and penalties because there will still be penalties for possessing too much cannabis in the state of Wisconsin under the legislation that we've drafted, refining those pieces. But at the crux of what we've been doing, our bill focuses on fully legalizing cannabis in the state of Wisconsin. This includes manufacturing, distribution, delivery, possession, and both recreational and medical cannabis legalization. One of the reasons why we didn't want to exclusively focus on medical legalization is because we don't want to limit the structure of people's medical choices, right? Through passing both recreational and medical legalization, you allow folks to one safely consume a product that is safe and regulated by state standards, and you don't end up crossing the pathway of some medical professionals who don't believe cannabis is medicine, right? There are people in the state of Wisconsin that are medical professionals that don't believe that cannabis is medicine for folks. So why, our goal is to say, why dive into that deeper conversation, and why not just allow folks to make that choice, right? With their medical professionals if they like, but also ensure folks are using a safe product that we know isn't contaminated, and so we can reduce some of the other issues that with substance use. I could take a deeper dive into a bunch of the moving pieces of this bill, But I think we'll kind of get to different components as the conversation progresses. But one of the other key pieces that we wanted to make sure was included in this legislation was one, drug screening, because drug screening processes would have to change if this was legalized, and also provisions for equity grants and expungement, right? So for folks who have been hyper criminalized for possession of cannabis, whether it was for personal use or whether it was for selling and distribution at different quantities, a lot of those folks have faced severe criminal charges. Some life in prison for cannabis, right? Which is insane, in my personal opinion, right? But under this bill, there will be a process established with our state court system, where folks would through our court system be expunged for previous charges, and those folks would have first access to grants and resources to go into business in a proper way, as it relates to cannabis sale, distribution, and production. Long term, as you think about cannabis legalization and the selling of cannabis in the state of Wisconsin, who remembers the amazing surplus that we had in the state of Wisconsin in the last budget cycle? Raise your hand. Right? Some folks, it was for folks who didn't know, we had a $7.6 billion surplus. A lot of that surplus was built off austerity, taking resources from our public schools, taking resources from our local communities, and holding on to those resources instead of redistributing them back into communities and properly funding our system. Why I say taking resources away? Because, for example, a lot of our school districts are going to referendum right now. 107 school districts are going to referendum on the fall ballot. Why is that? It's because during the pandemic, for 2 years, the state of Wisconsin gave $0 to public education. The state of Wisconsin said, use your ARPA dollars to fund education. And that was the constraints that every public school district was under. And a lot of people missed that piece of the conversation. But I wanted to say that because that's where we get that surplus from. We're facing another surplus of a substantial amount of dollars that this upcoming cycle, but we could have more if we legalize cannabis. In the first month of legalization in Minnesota, over 600. Sorry, let me go back to this note. Over 600, $462 million was produced through the legalization of cannabis in Minnesota. Imagine what that would mean for the state of Wisconsin. Right now, we're losing that revenue. Folks are going to Minnesota.
Excuse me, do you mean that was taxes collected by
Correct.
the state of Minnesota?
Correct. The tax revenue collected by the state of Minnesota was $462 million. Right? So if you think about, situations where we're prioritizing the needs of our communities, and we say we don't have the resources to do this, right? We don't have the resources to invest in our public education system, our housing system, drug treatment programs. All of those things could be properly funded through revenue generated by the sales of cannabis in the state of Wisconsin. And we're currently losing that revenue to Illinois, to Minnesota, to Michigan, because folks are going to those spaces to purchase cannabis. Why not do that? That's all I'll leave off on at the moment, and then we can take a deeper dive as this conversation progresses.
Hello, how's it going? I'll start with this. In this environment, it's easy to forget that we are only now escaping a prohibition on hemp and cannabis that was imposed in 1937 by way of the Marijuana Tax Act. Now we'll fast forward. From 1937 to 1970, the federal government would still issue certain farmers around the country the availability to grow hemp only for research purposes, but didn't make that open to everybody. So if you didn't have the avenues and the friends to get those licenses, you couldn't keep growing it for research. Just gotta pull up my timeline here now.
And that timeline is right in front of us here.
So I've been asked to come here today with my knowledge and just talk a little bit about the timeline of where the feds were and then where we sit in the state of Wisconsin and get you guys in where we were and where we're at, and open up the pathway for the next two to guide the conversation. So in 1970, the Controlled Substance Act was signed, and what that did was it outlawed cannabis, including hemp growth and production, by making it Schedule I drug classification under federal law. In 1970, the DEA said, well, we're not even letting anybody grow marijuana. We're gonna start the war on drugs, basically, and they signed this act into law. And what they did is they said no more research licenses being issued by the DEA, whether that's in any of the 50 states of America or tribal nation lands, to be able to plant hemp for research. So from that timetable, nothing was really ever done out there. I know the university in Mississippi, I know there's a smaller little research lab in Louisiana that had licenses with the government to still study hemp and basically ditchweed or the old kind of brickweed, the older style of cannabis that was around for a long time. And you fast forward from that point on, you get to 2014. In February of 2014, the federal farm bill was signed and remained in force all through until 2018, which established the hemp research pilot program, allowing hemp cultivation for research purposes only. So what they did is in 2013, a bunch of lobby groups and things got together and started lobbying at the federal level with the new U.S. Farm Bill coming out in 2014 to allow hemp to be added back as a commodity crop and allowed it to become available for research again. And they opened that up to all 50 states when they signed that Farm Bill in 2014. Now, a lot of states didn't jump on it right away. Obviously, Colorado did. They were the first one to actually sign the agreement to come together as a legislature and allow their farmers to say, hey, we want to apply for a research plot. We want to keep track of all the data, and we'll submit that data to the state at the end of it to keep it legal. Fast forward on, during that same time frame in 2014, the Farm Bill signs. Republican Scott Walker and his crew got together with a little push by a family in Wisconsin, and they signed what's called the technically and say, hey, I have a seizure disorder, and the doctor would have been able to issue you a prescription availability to get the extract that you need. From that point on, from 2014 on, a few other states started to sign on and doing their own research plots to move forward. In 2016 in Wisconsin hemp advocacy started again. Hemp advocates in Wisconsin start ramping up by meeting with Wisconsin legislatures to create state official legislation to allow Wisconsin to participate in the federal hemp research pilot program. let me tell you, that was not easy. We were able to go in there and talk about Lydia's law, but at that point it was, well, that's just an extract. Why do I want to let you grow it? What is it going to benefit? How does it mess with our other 11 big commodity crops in the state? Are we going to have to pay for this? There's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of questions. But we managed to convince the sheriff associations, the police associations in the state that hemp is hemp, marijuana is marijuana, and being able to have those type of conversations with them and bring in testimony from almost everybody we could find, they kind of got on the page going, okay, this makes sense. I guess we'll stand down a little bit. And as soon as they agreed to it, the rest of the state, the dominoes just fell for getting hemp basically legalized in the state of Wisconsin. So in 2017, Hemp 1.0 bill gets signed. On March 23rd, 2014, the SB 109 bill, also known as the Hemp 1.0, was signed by Wisconsin legislatures, allowing the growing and processing of industrial hemp, granting rulemaking authority and making appropriation at the state level. So what we did is we worked basically how it worked is we came up with good language. We met with Ledge Council at the state level. Ledge Council took our language and said, we're gonna give you some pointers here so the state doesn't get sued by the feds and it keeps everything out of court. And then from that point on, we had to take that language and introduce it to assembly members and Senate members and everything else to get them to agree to pick it up, have somebody author the bill technically, add their little touch to it, and then get everybody else to sign on to it. That was not easy, but we managed to do it. And we worked it through all the subcommittees. And I remember the biggest question was, well, what are we going to do about all these drug dogs? Well, we can start to phase them out as they retire and not train any new ones that you bring in to move that forward. I remember Senator Jack was just a big pain in the butt on that. So then from that point on, Wisconsin starts to boom a little bit. We go from 288 farmers basically in the first year of the 2018 of us being able to plant in that fall, being under our own research now. 2019 happens. We go to, I think it was 1,270 something farmers within a year. So that's an additional 1,000 farmers, additional 1,000 people putting hemp in the ground. During that time frame, we had a short window to go research hemp. We knew the next farm bill was coming. So at the end of 2017, now the US government's like, okay, it's been 5 to 7 years. The commodity thing that controls agriculture in country called the farm bill needs to be re-signed again. And they do that so then they can target different parts of agriculture to move all agriculture forward in our country. Because they don't want to leave it too open because that climate changes too fast for everybody to keep up with sometimes. So what they did at the federal level on December 20th, 2018, the federal farm bill was signed with expanding on the 2014 bill and created the domestic hemp production program, making hemp production federally legal with regulation through the USDA. So what that did is they said, okay, no longer do you need to grow hemp for research. You don't need to submit all your data and keep all these logs. We're gonna just make hemp federally legal for the states to move forward with their own type of laws and language and regulate their own programs. Or if there's states that want to get on board and can't afford it, or if your programs were already starting to fail, and Wisconsin was because our legislature on the red side refused to give the Department of Agriculture in our state more money to run the program. So they set it up to fail from the beginning, basically. So from that point on, a lot of states kept their own programs in place so they could keep control of their farmers and that commodity in their states. Wisconsin chose to kind of go a little bit different. So what we had to do in 2019, now that the new farm bill is signed, it's called Hemp 2.0 bill. On November 26, 2019, SB 188 bill, also known as Hemp 2.0, was signed by the Wisconsin legislature, revamping Hemp 1.0, closely mimicking the 2018 farm bill. We had to just change the language from we're letting our farmers do this for research to we're going to do this to treat it as a true commodity. And during that time frame, we didn't really tell a lot of people that we understood what was written in the U.S. Farm Bill. And I say that because in 2018, when the Farm Bill changed, and then we rolled into 2019 and wrote Hemp 2.0 in Wisconsin, we knew that we could start taking hemp and turning it into an extract and an isolate, and then we could start converting those hemp into minor cannabinoids such as the Delta 8s that you see on the markets today, the Delta 9s you see on the markets today. But we also knew that the language is written so vague that it would allow us to effectively legalize marijuana under the THC acid form of cannabis in 2018. I remember when we revamped our state law to mimic the federal law, I literally told the reporters, we just legalized marijuana in the state of Wisconsin and nobody even understands what we just did. And everybody laughed at me. Everybody told me I was an idiot. No, you're not, you're wrong. You'll never be able, no, you're going to jail. Don't even do that. And I just kept doing it. We just started testing. And then I sat down with the attorney general and I explained everything to him. And he just was like, well, looks like we can't do anything because the federal bill says that you can do this. And we have nothing in our laws that say you can't because you guys wrote the state law stating we're going to mimic the federal government, which I knew immediately, we won. We got 7 years now, 5 to 7 years until we got to sign the new farm. There's a way to open up a market in Wisconsin. And it's pretty impressive what we've done as hemp farmers in the short amount of time. Go from just growing hemp to providing you all minor cannabinoids to being able to provide you THCA flower. It took a little time for more people to get more comfortable to do that. Well, back to the timeline. 2022, Wisconsin switches to the USDA program because Wisconsin had built itself a $500,000 deficit, almost 700,000 when you really break all the numbers, of debt cap, trying to run a hemp program, but not getting funding to run the hemp program. So debt cap kept pulling from its coffers to support a hemp program that was failing. So they all agreed at that time, let's just give that hemp production side of growth to the USDA. Now, it's interesting that we turned over the growing to the USDA, but our processors, because the state was issuing hemp processing licenses for manufacturing and processing. All of that went out the window when we handed over the program to the USDA. But the USDA doesn't control processing. It's the FDA. So when the FDA isn't issuing processing licenses, a lot of our processors in our state are just doing what we're doing and hoping that the feds don't come knock on our door and start asking a bunch of questions. Because there's no real guidance on that side of the industry. Move forward to 2024. Somewhere in between 22 and 24, there was a Republican bill that got introduced. Mary Fikowski, she is a nice woman. She did have medical issues that they used cannabis to cure. All of that said, the bill was very restrictive and would have left us just in pill form, which is great for certain companies.
Can you go back real quick?
Yeah.
So Senator Mary Fikowski introduced a bill related to legalizing medical cannabis. But it was, like you were saying, restricted. One, it only allowed there to be state-owned dispensaries, which a lot of Republicans didn't like. They don't like big government. And then also, it only allowed of the small, it was trying to be the most restrictive medical, the goal of the bill was to be the most restrictive medical cannabis legalization bill in the country. A lot of folks in the Senate did not like it. It was a assembly-led bill. So it never got a hearing in the Senate. And it ended up dying. We never really heard it in the assembly because there was no path for it to be heard, get passed. So the Speaker of the House, Robin Voss, decided not to hear the bill at all.
One other thing that happened in all of that time frame is the referendums that I don't know if everybody got out to do in 2018 and 19, somewhere in there. That was a very fun path going to like Milwaukee. I helped very heavily to get that ballot question put on. We worked very heavily up in Green Bay to get the ballot question put on there. We worked very hard to get the ballot question in Madison. So that was very impressive to see the numbers be able to come out and fight against their communities a little bit, not fight, but push back and say, hey, this is something we want. For, you know, the Green Bay one especially, there was over 272 testimonies, and they had to sit there and listen to every single one of them before they could leave. So fast forward again. So now we're in 2024. Advocacy continues. Wisconsin hemp and cannabis advocates continue to push for cannabis legislation and regulation as we wait for the next federal farm bill to be signed, because that does have a lot to say with the products that are available today. So if you're using Delta 8, if you're using Delta 9, if you're using potentially CBG, it is technically a minor cannabinoid under the farm bill, the way they look at it. If you're using THCA, if the farm bill changes, and it was supposed to already be signed last fall, and they just keep pushing it off until after this next election to see who's running what, I'm pretty sure. If the farm bill changes, all of the access that you have now in state that you're comfortable getting goes bye-bye. If we have nothing in place to protect us. So I hope that helps a little bit of where we were and where we're at and where we want to go is what we're going to talk about now. Thank you, everybody.
Hi everyone, how are you? Can you hear me? I'm gonna veer like all the way to the other side. So really my pathway is more in the medicinal plant medicine, health and wellness aspect of cannabis. I came into that as a cannabis patient. I was diagnosed with PTSD when I was 11, on a ton of medications, and through not being able to metabolize those pharmaceuticals, went on a journey of my own trying to find things that could help me manage my panic attacks and process my trauma and do all those things. I was introduced to cannabis, and since that point, I have been using that medicinally to help me treat what I go through with anxiety. Also, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was in my early 30s, and I don't use pharmaceuticals for that either because I didn't function well on those. Couldn't think, had body fatigue, brain fatigue. I would get hives. The worst side effects I would have, times 5. And so through that became an herbalist, really trying to help myself become healthier, to be able to function. And I knew there was a way to do that with cannabis. And so that's really where I come from, is more, I believe in Western medicine having a place, but I also believe we rely very heavily on certain aspects of that world that we shouldn't. And we can see those side effects in people who are on some of these medications long-term. Some of these are meant for acute, things, but we're on them for years. And what we start to see are side effects, whether it's our intestines, our gut health, our ability to remember, dementia, Alzheimer's. We know that there are those links. And so plant-based medicine for me are for those people who are looking for an alternative way to heal their bodies and to feel better. And so when we talk about, I think the biggest thing I look at is by decriminalizing, by legalizing, we're able to explore this plant in a deeper way, to understand the potential it has to heal our communities, not just health-wise, but heal our communities and the things that they're lacking, which is education, funding, resources, good roads, green spaces. Cannabis can fund those things for our community if we do the legalization and legislation in the right way. And I think for me, that's where I come in as a cannabis advocate, and just being a canna gives me a home in which I can help people rediscover different ways to take care of themselves. That there are other options out there, whether you're dealing with just everyday aches and pains, or you're dealing with things like fibromyalgia and MS and cancer and those types of things. We know that this plant works. We all have anecdotal experiences for those of us who use it that prove that people can feel better, recuperate faster, heal from traumas, and also fight disease with this plant. And so that's really my space in this whole conversation. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. One of the questions on the legislation and other states have played with is how to help the communities that have been hurt the most by cannabis legislation in the past. So for many years now, we've used that legislation to hurt some communities. And now with this coming in, there's a concern that, well, if it's legalized, that big business, private equity, large corporations will be the beneficiary of cannabis, as opposed to small businesses. I've heard the term legacy entrepreneurs to transition into a legitimate business. They know sales, they know marketing, they know how to get the product out. How do we get licenses to those people? How do we get them up to speed to coming into the system in a legal way? Would you like to talk about that?
So this is something that every state that has legalized has begun to, had a component related to this. I can say that no state has done it really, really well. A lot of the times there's the intent, and there's the intent of putting these models like equity grants, or access to licenses for marginalized communities, but the barrier to entry is too high. Often to get a license to be a producer, a processor, a distributor, it costs tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars up front just to get the license, right? So if you're paying them for that to get the license, and you're getting loans for that, you now need hundreds of thousands of dollars to also set up a business, right? So even if we have this process where we prioritize folks, right, but we don't have a process for folks to access the capital, it's kind of mute, right? It doesn't work. Often when we draft legislation as legislators, we miss that mark, right? We have good intentions, but the impact of our legislation misses the marks and misses the people that we intend on supporting most. With our piece of legislation, we've took some of the pieces from other states, and we've tried to make the best of both worlds. And our legislation doesn't outline everything, but one huge piece of it is we established a non-lapsable segregated trust fund called the Community Reinvestment Fund, which would consist of 60% of all state-generated tax revenue from cannabis sales going towards those licenses, those supportive resources for folks to be able to become legacy entrepreneurs, but then also pouring into the communities that have been harmed the most. Sending those resources to those communities to develop drug treatment programs, to fund education programs, and to support communities in other needs from housing and so on. The other bigger piece of this conversation that people often don't think about when it comes to legalization of cannabis is that under federal law, even under what states that have legalized, those dollars cannot be held in the bank, right? So if those dollars from your profits can't be held in the bank, how do you hold, where do you place those dollars, right? So we've been trying to figure out how to work that out with the bank and trying to, feed into federal legislation advocacy to ensure that we are building a system that works. Illinois has been figuring out a lot of fixes to that, thanks to their lieutenant governor doing a lot of research, and we've been trying to follow their lead to work out that. We also include a tax bill to this legislation, LRB 4468, which provides $375,000 for law enforcement to go through over the biennium, to go through training, to reassess their processes so that they know how to properly interact with communities that now are using a legal product. And then also there's also an effort for some of the Community Reinvestment Fund to go provide grants promoting diversity, equity, community health, and promoting inclusion and racial equity throughout the state. That's one of the huge pieces of this bill, and one of the pieces that my office spent the most time working on, alongside figuring out pathways to reducing drug discrimination and employment, in the employment process through drug testing and so on. And then also creating labor peace agreements so that when folks begin to establish a footing in this business, folks can have access to union paid jobs, right? We know that when unions exist, folks have access to negotiating fair wages, and where in states where they haven't figured out labor peace agreements in their bills, people are making $5 to $10 less for working these jobs. So that's what we've been. My office spent a lot of time this past session, and we're really close to refining to perfection in this upcoming bill. Anybody else have anything to add?
On the union side of it, so certain states that have gotten it right, the Teamsters have done a really good job of helping push that. And the Teamsters are very strong in Wisconsin and Illinois with all of their members. So I really feel if the language is written right, everybody's going to be able to make the revenue they're supposed to make. And the big corporations are going to really struggle trying to flood our state knowing they're going to have to pay that much to a employee.
Great. Phillip, this is another one for you. What is the landscape in Wisconsin with respect to agriculture? Are people leaving certain crops to do hemp? Or we have new farmers in the business? What's happening from an agricultural perspective as far as trends?
It's tough. It's been a roller coaster ride for hemp, I guess, in the state of Wisconsin, for people to get into it. I always tell people, don't get into this industry if you don't have a way to get rid of it, which means process it and get it into an end retail product to get it to the consumer. In our state, a lot of people planted it in 2018, 2019, 2020, thinking they were going to be the richest millionaires and they're going to buy yachts and sitting on the beach drinking and whatever else. I've heard it all. But a lot of people invested a lot of money and tried in our industry. And I always tell people, anybody can grow good hemp. Anybody can grow good cannabis with time and that type of thing. The hard part right now is getting it processed and getting it to retail. So I like to call it, so in 2018, all of our processors in our state were bring us all your stuff because they were all trying to get it figured out, and we'll process it and we'll do it on splits. I'll keep 50%. I'll do all the work. You cut it down, you chop it, you get it where I can handle it. I will take it and process it. And then the processor would keep 50% of his split and then give you back your 50% and say, oh, well, we'll figure it out. So that went well the first year, and allowed a lot of those 288 farmers to actually find somewhere to like get it like into an extract so they could store it and figure out what to do with it. In 2019, a lot of the processors said, well, wait a minute. Now we have too much extract from 2018 that we haven't been able to sell. So now we're going to introduce what's called a toll charge for processing. And let me tell you, some of them toll charge contracts, a lot of farmers got screwed over basically when the processors switched to doing splits to tolling. A lot of farmers would bring stuff, pay for the stuff, and the stuff would never even get processed. And the processor would just take the money and go, well, nothing you can do, try to sue me. So the landscape was rough in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Now, COVID happened, and it kind of got rid of a lot of the bad characters and players in our state. Like, it seemed almost overnight. Poof. That were only here from out of state, investing a lot of money, trying to monopolize and set themselves up to now allow us as Wisconsin residents to even have a chance in the space. So COVID, bad and good, I guess, for the hemp industry in the state of Wisconsin. But But it's interesting. So during that same time frame, COVID starts to end, right? And now the big liquor lobby is saying, well, wait a minute, we can do infused drinks. Wait a minute, the tavern league's like, we've been against this for so long, but we can make money on it. And they use the end of COVID and everybody coming back out of their house to push the infused THC drinks. Did you know in the last 120 days, THC drink sales in the state of Wisconsin produced 17 to 19% of all the profit the Tavern League and the big distributors are making? Think about that. So now the shareholders are seeing profit. And all of a sudden, now we got another medical bill potentially coming in the future. Woo. So Wisconsin still has a long way to go. You have THCA until the next farm bill tells us we can't do it potentially. But I will say this, the Republicans in our state, they would rather put and come across the aisle and work with people at some point to have some type of state-run program for the federal government, and if Kamala wins, legalizes it at the federal level because they want to have control, not have to listen to what the feds tell them how they can run the program. And if there's not a state-run program before the federal government legalizes, they will tell us what to do, and our legislature will have no control. That is the landscape.
Thank you. One last question from me, and then we'll take some other questions to Brooke and maybe Colin. As you see the retail, so I think a lot of us see a lot of these shops popping up in Milwaukee. How are they doing? How is the business doing from a retail perspective? And how do you position yourself to be ready for all the changes that can happen? We'll pass it.
Oh man, how much time do we have? This is a really tough business. There's a lot of just obstacles and things within this industry that a normal business doesn't really have to experience, from financial services, banking, insurance. So I guess the question of where I see it going is, we're all subject to whatever kind of framework and regulatory landscape we're soon to be facing. I think cannabis is here to stay in some capacity, one way or another. You can't really put this back into the hole, right? It's already out far enough, which is good. But if anybody ever comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm interested in getting into this business," I will do whatever I can to talk them out of it. Not because I fear any sort of other people in the space, just because I know the challenges and the things that it takes to perform in this space and to sustain and have staff. And it's a lot of work. Sometimes it's like, is this even worth it? But then you work with these customers and the communities, and within minutes you're like, yeah, this is worth it. This is why we do it. And this is why we continue to fight through the struggles. So it is certainly challenging, but again, a lot of positives to it, and excited and optimistic as to where it could go. Obviously, there's a lot of considerations from a legal standpoint and all of that, which we'll know at some point in time where that's going to go. But yeah, it's very challenging, but rewarding at the same time. So I don't know if that answers the question.
I would say for what I see in the community and like in Milwaukee specifically, you see things popping up, but what you don't see, I think, are what the spaces that opened up in 2018. We opened up in like this, we do cannabis day in, day out. Like that's our specialty, that's our expertise. We spend time training our staff so that they understand what they're recommending to people. We get people from 18, 21 to 75 and older who are, everyone's in a different space, and you have to be able to know if we're talking about, more recreational side of cannabis, or if we're talking about medicinally and managing pain and being able to just function in your day-to-day life. And so I think it's important too that we want some type of regulation. We want the bad players, right, to not be a part, because this is a potent, powerful medicine that we're talking about, a plant, and we don't know everything there is to it. And when people don't take that into consideration, and it's more about the money and the what can I sell you and what can I get you to buy, and less about what are you saying to me, what do you need, that's where I struggle. So what I wish to see is more people doing it. How Colin set this up in 2018 is we're here to educate. We're here to explain this to people. It's confusing. It changes every day. I swear every day there's a new cannabinoid, a new synthetic cannabinoid that I didn't know about. That's now like, 2,000 times stronger than regular THC. And that's where I have a problem. I have a problem with synthetics because I think it goes against what cannabis is in its truest nature, is it comes from the earth. This is a plant that was given to us. And when you start manipulating it, when you start trying to make it stronger and more potent and faster acting, that's where we start seeing side effects and bad effects happening to our people, is because we're manipulating something that shouldn't be manipulated. So like, I'm a very firm believer in wanting to see regulation, to see these synthetics, kind of be done with, because I think it creates a harder place for those of us who are trying to come from like this is a plant, this is natural, this is plant-based medicine. It creates a super murky area. And I think it drives the bad players, because there's a lot of money to be made in that arena. The vape shops, the smoke shops, they sell, 5,000 other products. And what kind of commitment and time do they put in to the cannabis products that they're bringing into their stores, and making sure, where are they growing? How are they cultivating? How are they processing? What are they putting in their products? What additives? Those all play a part in how we respond to this plant. And that's how I think it gets a bad name at the same time.
Thank you for that.
Great. All right, why don't we start with some questions?
Well, when cannabis was made illegal, there were a lot of other uses for hemp that farmers grew hemp for. And is that being considered? Are farmers starting to grow hemp for building, for cloth, for other types of things?
So, yes. So the industrial side of this is starting, it's been very slow because it's hard for investment, and a lot of other industries have their hands so invested in certain things, it's hard to break into those barriers. But it is happening. It's not happening as robust as everybody thought it was going to, but it is slowly happening. It's not one of those race to the top and crash. The industrial side of this is slowly doing this gradually. And it's still projected to be a multi-billion-dollar market as we keep moving forward. By 27, I think they say it's supposed to be almost $9 billion. Think about that. In 2018, it was worth was 260 million or something like that. So it was a very small industry.
What are they using it for?
So it's interesting. They're using it for rope. They are using it for textile. The hard part with textile is when our industrial revolution kind of ended and the war ended, a lot of people stopped obviously producing hemp, but they stopped producing other things very heavily in our country. And all of the spindling machines that are required to make the twine, to make the fabric, to make the rope, a lot of that technology actually got bought up by firms in India and got shipped back there. They shipped it there. India won't allow a U.S. citizen into any of those places to see those textile machines and things that are there, so we can't reverse engineering it. So that is why getting that technology put back in place needs a major, major investment by our federal government. Now, it's interesting you say that. I think most people here know that Wisconsin was the second largest producer in Baraboo and Portage, Wisconsin, for processing, growing and processing actual hemp for the industrial side. Now, my friend Marcus that owns Newbury, he brought a hemp block. Him and his guys have been doing a lot of research on how to make these type of blocks. At some point, we are going to grow 40 acres jointly and build a house on that 40 acres to show the public. I'm trying to figure out the time frames. Is it going to be 2 years or 3 years? So that type of thing, because other places in the country have done that, and we're trying to do the same thing. Now, it's interesting. We've also produced carbon fiber out of it. I remember in 2018 walking in going, well, we took the same technology the paper company's doing. I took all their machines, we ran it through this little mock lab and ended up with Langdon, and Langdon's one of the precursors to getting the carbon fiber. And we were able to get it all the way there, and nobody will give me money and fund me to do it. Hopefully that helps.
Darin, could you speak to the importance of expungement in these processes? Because I was looking after you spoke earlier, and I might be wrong, but it does look like there are some states that legalize without expungement programs.
Correct.
Some are automatic, some are not. So can you talk about the importance of this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes states have created let me explain why expungement is so important. If anybody's followed anything that's happened in the criminal legal system over the past year, you will see that there have been a series of cases related to death in state-run prisons, related to corruption, and overarchingly messages about the fact that all of our state prisons are over capacity. Cost of corrections in the state of Wisconsin is the biggest piece of the state budget, right? 2. So as you think about people who are sitting in our jails that did not commit a violent crime, because you will hear consistently messages about the folks who commit violent crimes being everyone who's in our state prisons. That is not the vast majority of folks who are incarcerated in the state. Vast majority of folks who are incarcerated in the state did not commit violent crimes. Some of them have done, white collar crimes, such as, tax fraud, things like that. Of also things like cannabis, and then other smaller offenses that go on in proportion. A lot of those folks could be brought back into communities and be connected to programs that help reduce recidivism, which would lower our cost of corrections and actually make space in prisons for the folks who commit the most violent crimes. Because right now you have folks sitting in, for example, Waupun, and during the summer in those cells, because I've toured those facilities in the summer, it gets over 120 degrees. And folks are left in their cells 23 hours a day, right? We don't talk about that. One of the people who passed away in Waupun, they didn't have water in their cell for 3 days. And they weren't checked on for 8 hours. They passed away and no one found them until 8 hours later, right? So as we think about the expungement piece of this legislation, it's one of the most important pieces to me into our communities, because no one goes into prison expecting to die. They expect that they're going to, serve their time and hopefully return to their communities as a better person. But often, right now, especially in our state, more and more folks every day are not getting that chance. As it relates to the amount of folks on cannabis in our correctional system, on cannabis charges, there's over 10,000 folks incarcerated on cannabis charges. Some of them are on the old law cannabis charges, which means that they can still fight for reduced sentences. And then some of them are on the new law, which is they have to serve out the time that they were given, right? Fully. What the expungement means in this bill is that everyone would be who's eligible for expungement would be automatically taken through a process of expungement. Right. The state courts, instead of like in other states, they say that this is an option, but they still force folks who are incarcerated to go through that process on their own. Right? They have to find a lawyer. They have to learn how to do the court documents. And then maybe if they can figure that all out, right, we can get a hearing to be expunged. What our bill says is that, no, we're not placing that earnest on folks who are incarcerated because they don't know. We're placing that earnest on the court system to go through that process and take folks off of those rolls as quickly and effectively as possible. So that's why getting the details right on expungement is so critical. And then there's pieces related to how those records are cleared up and so on. Because we all know that whether or not people have paid their debt to society or not, their criminal record follows them for life. It's hard to get housing, it's hard to find a job, it's hard to even be able to show up for your family when you need to. And we make it harder and harder. When you are incarcerated, you are always navigating that system, whether you are behind bars or in communities. And right now we have over 36,000 people in communities who are still facing the effects of incarceration in many ways.
And also, just to be fair, I think no one should be profiting off of something while other people are suffering and losing their ability to have a quality life, period. So, I'm sorry, I just had to skip.
That's a good point.
Well, real quick, just to add to that, because I was talking to a gentleman just earlier this week, and because I think of the people right now who are in prison, and and like there's just so many parts of this that aren't fair or just or even close to. But he was explaining to me how he couldn't chaperone for his kids' school trip because 7 years ago he got caught with a joint and caught a felony. That's crazy to me. I mean, one of the nicest guys I've ever met, super successful business, but that background check, no, you can't be around kids.
And that's why I said
There's
there
so
are
much.
over 36,000 people still facing the effects of incarceration in their communities. Right? Whether or not you've been successful, right? You paid your debt to society, you've done everything, you work a good job, you started your own business, you started a family, you still deal with the effects of incarceration despite doing what you were supposed to do for the rest of your life. And that's the problem.
Marcus, you got something?
Yes. Hi, I'm Marcus. I'm regional. I also have a private health farm. Also, the reinsurance society because I'm a pioneer, but because we're looking at this pioneering also in Cannabis. I am one of those ones that went through the system in 2017, 2016, came out in 2018. So I hear a lot of legal this, legal that, and the question I asked her mentioned earlier. But so it's down to him, produce and grow. When you look at that as a whole, and you take that, there's a lot of income that's had, and that's been progressively made each year that you're missing out to income. So then you have that, and you have 2%.
Yeah.
To represent, you're sitting in prison for the full time, even though they say you didn't apply for it, you're applying for a system that doesn't want to let you out, put you in there with no real protection. So let's be real. You're going in prison, you're not getting out early, unless you are an informant or you are a pedophile. This is the state of Wisconsin that we're living in right now. When you go to Dodgeville and get classified, and then on a non-violent offense, it will seem to stand correction, which is the minimum maximum. So as an inmate, I look at the savings the taxpayers pay. Now, granted, I did it right, but you got to pay. So now, what we're looking at, we're trying to now make a plant that's legal, but then also have the pioneers say, hey, how to do that? How are we able to cultivate those plants? Can you help us out? And as a convict, because I'm stuck with how that wall that is talked about, I would tell you no. Because I have to sell each individual type of recipe, any type of thing that I get, because I have a recipe that I'm trying to build, but I can't build it because I'm here. I didn't know the actual steps that you have to take. Now, granted, I'm a different case because my family is so a lot of medicine that I'm originally from down south, Georgia. So we do remedies. We don't do something. We don't do things that can cause cancer. You said to me the other next you did a kid, you're going to store it by. But because of that, and then we're in this kind of level, where Wisconsin right now is the cheapest spot to cultivate. But we're going to be compared to legislation where I know people don't want to alter the plant, but if we don't alter the plant, we're not going to grow the plant. The market's not there. Realistically, it's not. So what do? You're seeing farmers right now after milk crash, happening with grass and farms, a lot of dairy farmers, innocent contracts.
Yeah.
They lost that revenue. So what are we doing? Are we going to sit here and teach that and work on the government to help us out? Or are we going to come together as a state with actual people who have pioneer hands on, the politicians who've been there, done that, like Tim Pulaski, and actually come up with real results versus, oh, this is nice, this is beautiful, this is love. That's the thing it is. And people are still sitting in the institution right now for rats and roaches. They're getting their per diem on the day. They're being locked down for unjust reasons. You know what I mean? They experience it on with petroleum-based products or petroleum-based medicine. So when you're talking about legalizing, and then especially Wisconsin, I think Wisconsin really needs to understand what income opportunities, tax breaks that we're losing because we're kind of like on the fence teeter-totter, and we have people in fire who don't really care about the public. If they cared about the public, this thing would have been changed before I would have enough. I mean, we let Iowa beat Wisconsin to have medical marijuana. But that's because they have some form of communication. They understand that it's not a total start. Well, my party come up with a bill, so we're gonna squash the bill. And the public is standing up and driving. We're looking for medicine. We're looking for revenue flow. We're looking to get our revenue response, so we can't educate our youth to not make those decisions. But we're not doing it. It's almost like we're pretending for China to say, okay, we're gonna move this line, we move this line. We're gonna check for people's lives and our safety. And I think we really need to put 10 toes down and dig in and figure out how do we create a visible solution for the most part.
And hey, that's the round of applause. Who wants to try to follow that up?
I mean, I think that was, you hit the nail on the head, right? The state of Wisconsin is last in so many things. And often we're racing to the bottom of the bucket instead of to the top, right? Even when community members bring up the solutions that make sense, right? There have been so many proposals to improve conditions in our prisons that have been introduced that never see the light of day. We have so many times cannabis legalization legislation have come up in the state. They can't even get a hearing. And when I say that these bills can't even get a hearing, that means that the public doesn't even get the opportunity to weigh in on this legislation, right? We don't even begin to have the conversation about if we should do this or if we shouldn't, and why we should or why we shouldn't do something. Because we're not even, in terms of, when I say we, I mean the legislature, we're not even going through the democratic process when it comes to the ideas that are being brought from communities around the state. And that's sad because we're missing so many opportunities to fix so many things save us so much money, right? Create new avenues to generate revenue, and create economic opportunities for our future, right? Our children. When our children thrive, our state thrives. We have something called the Wisconsin Idea, right? Which is the foundation of our state, that we would provide education to any citizen, regardless of their economic status, high quality education. And look at us now. We're effectively defunding public education at every level. And what does that mean? It means that our future cannot manifest into something great, and we will continue to lag behind the rest of the country in being able to radically transform this great state into the leader it should be.
What do you got on your table there?
Yeah. Well, we got the hemp log, we got a little piece of hemp rope, and then I brought a half pound of THCA. Afterwards, you want to come up and smell it? All right ahead. We got to be able to bring safe access stuff because this is federally legal for me to bring. In a few months, it might be illegal for us to even hold it in our hands, unless we get it fixed at the state level. But no, so this is 23 or 24% THCA. THCA is goofy. It's the acid form of cannabis. When you add heat to that acid form, the hydrogen molecule busts off and leaves behind workable cannabis. So in that process, you lose about a third. So this is probably, if you were to light it and actually smoke it, by the time the conversion's done, it'd probably be like 13, 14%, maybe 15% total THC. So that's what we brought today to show the people. One last thing, Bobby here with Let's Legalize Wisconsin. If you're looking to get involved with advocacy, that's the way to go right now. We do have 3 or 4 groups around the state, but we're all kind of centering around Let's Legalize Wisconsin because we need a central location to bring everybody's voices to the table. Indeed.
We're on all social media as Let's Legalize Wisconsin.
Brooke, any last words?
Pop that in and pop up.
From a health perspective, I think that's our time. You see the panelists. Thank you. Let's give them a hand. Whatever way you're working on it, and for the rest of us, we're active in discussing and being voters, and we can continue to educate ourselves around these issues. So, thanks for coming. Thanks. Enjoy. And if you want to keep coming back to our potlucks every third Thursday of each month, we do this.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for stopping out with us. We got it. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Keep an eye out. Got to pack up and get home and get some sleep. So thanks for stopping out, guys. My beans are out of here. Heading out of Milwaukee. One love.
Yeah, I've got it.